Under that song, Spirit is Calling, it reminds me that our focus this year is about Spirit calling us and how to activate spirituality in our life as a way of responding to that call. And how to activate spirituality is the good question. How do you do that? And, well, I think it's by making space for it in your daily life. And what is the it that you're making space for is the really good question. And actually that's part of the activation, to find out what it is so you can throw the switch and activate it. You know, that's what it is. So what we're doing is we're looking at 12 key ideas, I guess you can call them spiritual values, to see what will happen if we bring them into a strong position in our awareness on a daily basis. Does it change our experience of life and our relationship to the world around us? And if you are using the daily interactive guide, you probably noticed around about a short while ago the shift towards this month's theme, because this month is all about activating love in your life, and not just romantic love, not just love in your community, but really love as what you are, as the way you relate to everything, love as the only thing you know how to do. So that's what we're looking at. How do we do this? And the idea is that when we are in love, then we're in the right place. And we're looking how to find our way into that if you've stumbled or strayed away from that. You know, I like the idea of activating as a theme, activating spirituality or activating love, because to me it conveys this idea of options. You know, turn it on, activate it, it's a choice, because I don't like to be told what to do. Do you? You know, so I love this. The way I see it is that here are these ideas. There's love, and there's honesty, and there's service, and there's compassion. But there are options. Turn it on or don't turn it on. They still remain available. You know, it's like the color blue. Just because the color blue exists, it doesn't mean I have to paint my house blue. And if I decide not to paint my house blue, well, blue still continues to exist. And that's really important, especially in this particular month where the focus is on love, activated or not. Nobody's going to make you. It's an option. In fact, it's an experiment. You get to play with it. What happens when I bring this idea of being loving right into the focus of my awareness and live from it? Does it have any impact in how I relate to the world, my experience of life? In the little handout that you received with your announcement page, it's got this really interesting bit of writing that says, you know, to truly get loving others in particular, you really have to get loving yourself. And another way of saying that is the way I love others, or even my environment, has got something to do with how I know to love myself. So we're just starting there. We're just diving in right over there with the question, how do I show self-love? What are the things that I do that show self-love, you know? Assuming that there is a perfect way for you and me to show self-love to ourselves, we want to activate that, to deepen that more so we can live in there and live from there and relate to people from that. You know, so I started there. I dived right in to take a look at how do I treat myself and does that show self-love? You know. Look, when you're sitting on a flight from Cape Town to Frankfurt for 9 hours and then a 5-hour layover and then 11-hour flight from Frankfurt to San Francisco, you have a lot of time to think about these things. You know, so I started to think about it. How do I treat myself? I even thought about how do the people in my close circle of friends, in my community, how do they treat themselves? And what I discovered was actually there's room for improvement. I mean, without getting even spiritual, without even getting too metaphysical or mystical or philosophical, just straightforward evaluation of how I treat myself when it comes to things like schedule, nutrition, rest, friendships, habits, and so on, see, there's room for improvement. And so as I started to think about this on the flight, I didn't want to get overwhelmed by all the places where there could be improvements. I started to organize it into categories, 4 main areas of where there's room for me to activate a love of myself, so I could flip that switch and start to live in a way that illustrates that kind of self-appreciation, And here's what I discovered, and maybe it's true for you too. There are 4 ways, at least, in which I don't show terrific self-love. Number 1, I move too fast. Number 2, I don't have good self-discipline. Number 3, it's easy for me to get in a rut, to get out of inspiration, to get out of love, and get into same old, to allow it. And number 4, I'm pretty weak in the area of balance, I can get out of balance easily, and then I can do that whole thing, being too strict, and then balance is an issue. So I'm just going to look at those 4 areas to see if I can activate something in there to bring greater awareness of self-love. And so they are, just so that you can work along with me, see if it's of any value to you. Number 1, to take time, to take the time that is required for me to do a satisfying job by me in whatever it is that I'm doing at any moment, So I can pour myself into it. So you can pour yourself into it. And the second one is, people love this word, discipline. We'll talk about it. But to discipline yourself to follow, your innate wisdom. I call it your heart. To follow your wisdom rather than to follow every single impulse and every single preference. When I started to investigate this, I noticed just how much time was freed up when I turned away from impulse or habit-driven activities. Whew. The third one is to inspire yourself, to put yourself in the kind of environments, among the kind of people, and engaged in the kind of activities that you really love. I'm reminded of a minister friend of mine who loves her work, and she loves working with people, but she was finding herself exhausted because she had forgotten that in all that working with people, she was also allowed to spend time with people that she truly enjoyed spending time with, that, blessed her and lifted her up. She forgot that part, And then the last one is balance, And balance is appreciating the middle ground so that you can make allowances for being indulgent, for having special moments, treats, surprises, impulses, Because for me, if I know I can have chocolate at any time, then maybe I won't want it all of the time. That's the kind of thinking. So let's start with, I don't want to discuss that. It may not be a good illustration, but you get the idea. But we'll start with number 1, to take the time, to take your time. I was on this flight from Cape Town to Germany, and getting onto the flight to Frankfurt. I like to sit at the back of the plane. I love sitting at the back of the bus. I don't know why I enjoy that so very much. Anyway, there we were getting on the plane, and this couple behind me seemed to be in a tremendous rush to get to their seats. Then the lady in front of me stops the traffic, because now she has to unload everything she needs from her backpack, which is too big to get up there, and then the water, should it stay, and the couple behind me, they are huffing and they're clicking and they are mumbling, and as she's standing there, they are shuffling closer to me, as if, this urgency will really show her that she is messing up everything. And I'm cracking up because, we're all going to get there at the same time. And as I'm sitting there laughing at them, I'm thinking, well, it sounds like take your time means go slow. But actually, sometimes speed is valuable. Sometimes quick is very important, like that very same day I was sailing on a yacht on the bay there in Cape Town in very, very strong winds, a windy day, and the captain of the yacht had to depend on quick. The crew had to deliver quickly. Because when the direction of that wind changed, they had to shift all kinds of things into different positions. Fast. They had to be quick. But not panicked. Quick, but not indignant. Quick, but not huffy. Not fussy. Not controlling. Not angry. Not resistant. Not, you know what I mean? So I watched them be quick, and I noticed that at the same time there was calmness in them too. And so it reminded me that taking time is not so much about speed as it is about awareness. So then take time can be like the kind of awareness you have where you really enjoy your food, whether you're a fast eater or a slow eater. Or the kind of awareness where you really listen to music. It can be fast music or slow music, but it's not just music to cover over some background sound all the time. Or it's the kind of awareness where you are really present to listen to somebody, whether it's a fast conversation or a slow conversation. I guess what it's about is being there. And the key for me was really in watching that crew on the yacht. Because quick was part of the function of success for them. But when quick shows up in me, like in things like shopping or walking or eating, and that quick is driven by some other unrelated urgency, I don't feel like I'm being self-loving. I feel like I'm tearing myself apart. And then that's where there is room for me to practice slowing down to the speed of being there, no matter how fast the activity is. And then, you and I can do that and then evaluate, does this feel better? Does this feel like a self-loving action to be here? And it takes a little discipline, which is the second point. I mentioned that word is kind of tricky for some people. They don't like discipline. Discipline yourself to follow your heart and not your impulse. Well, discipline's a beautiful word. It means to be a disciple. And what does a disciple do? A disciple is obedient. So what does that mean? That means just for this week then, to be obedient to the kind of activities that express self-love in your life. To agree with them. Standing in airports for long periods of time. Oh, you learn so much. Because they have shops with things in them that you don't need. But they are beautiful things. And they call to you from their packages. You could easily get into impulse shopping. I was thinking about impulse shopping, standing there at the airport, and I thought, there's something to learn from impulse shopping. Now, you know what I mean when I say impulse shopping. The kind of shopping where you get home and you can't remember exactly why you bought it. Or you get home and you never open the box. Or you get home and you do open the box, but you never use it. Or you get home and you do open the box and you use it, but every time you use it, you have this empty, dull feeling that goes along with, why is this here? Now, not all impulse buying is wrong. But sometimes you have the inspiration, you identify the right thing, you buy it, and it all works out well. I know. I'm talking about that thing that is like time-wasting or life-wasting activities, habits. The kind of things that leave you nowhere different than if you didn't do them. They're just the kind of things that you just do when you're standing around the airport of your life. You know what I mean? Or worse, the kind of things that after you've done them, you feel dull and empty. I've talked to a lot of people about these kind of habits, and sometimes they say they don't even understand why they do them. I know what they mean. Maybe we've just done them for so long that now they're a habit, a routine. Here's an exercise to find out if you have any. You can ask yourself, what is the first thing you do when you get home? Or what's the first thing you do when you get up in the morning? I looked at that and I realized that when I used to get home, the first thing I used to do was to turn the TV on. Why? Couldn't tell you. How much time did it eat up? Too embarrassed to tell you. How did I feel about it as a result of doing that? Well, actually, when I started looking into it, nothing. It was nothing. It was empty. It was dull. A life eater. And so I started to look into that and see how I needed to discipline myself, or rather how I needed to be obedient to different kind of activities, anything that would allow me to feel self-love, a goodness about what I was doing. And in the beginning, I suffered from a case of perfectionism. Because, if I couldn't paint a whole landscape in 5 minutes, then it's not going to be worth it. But I didn't mind watching TV for 2 hours. Do you know what I mean? So in the beginning, I had to learn how to be satisfied with really small portions. But friends of mine who are writers say, actually, that's how you do it. You write a little bit every single day, even if it's one word, even if it's a sentence, and then over time you have developed this writing muscle. I have a friend who paints miniatures. And part of his discipline is every morning to paint just a tiny little bit, because that's about how big the canvas is, so he can only just, And what that reminded me of is actually that discipline doesn't have to be painful. That even walking 5 minutes a day can open the gateway to running a marathon. I understand that because, 4 years ago, I couldn't run around Spring Lake. And I had to walk a little bit. Once a week, and then twice a week, and then over a period of now I can. So I know that's possible. I know it is. This is a side note, and it has to do with discipline. And I just mention it because, I noticed traveling around the world that people's attitude towards us Americans has shifted over time. People used to admire us for our ingenuity, our philanthropy, our discipline. But it's not so. In general strokes, what I find now is mostly people think of us as, lazy and undisciplined and self-centered. That's what I encounter most of all. Now, that may not be true of anybody in this room, But I know what it does for me is that it reminds me to not be part of whatever creates that image, for me to stand in my discipline and be obedient to things that make me feel in love with being who I am, The third point is about being inspired, What I love about traveling around the world, even if I encounter opinions like that, is that it inspires me to think. I love that. Sometimes it's hard, but I love that it inspires me. I love traveling with folk from this community. We go places and and then in addition, we saw giraffe and zebra and you name it. We saw everything. And that is actually extraordinary. I mean, some people go to Africa and see 2 of them. We saw all of them, and I mention it because it allowed us the next day to shift gears. Because what we were able to do is, on our Jeep, we took the conscious decision to go out on the ride and to take no cameras at all. To just go out and to be present to whatever experience the bush wanted to present to us without the action of recording it, other than in our memory cells, And at one point we asked the driver to stop the Jeep and to turn off the engine, and we just sat there and listened to the intensity of the African bush. And we talked about it later, how we had to take the time, first of all, for the experience, and second of all, we had to discipline ourselves to do something different from what our habit was. And third of all, we let ourselves be inspired from what was around us and inside of us, and I think it's safe to say we'll be utterly changed forever. And you don't need to go to Africa for that experience. I mean, do you know that there is only one place in the world where we have coastal redwoods? Right here. Do you know that Bodega Bay is legendary in its seascapes and landscapes and mind-expanding views? And it's not always in nature. It's like, what about a concert like the one we're offering? Or what about the movie we're showing? It's not so much what as the question, do you place yourself in environments to be opened? That's the real question, Because not all moments of inspiration are the same. I mean, there were other moments on this trip of inspiration in which the inspiration left us thoughtful, like, people's opinions of us Americans. Or moments of inspiration that left us tender, like the inspiration that we felt at the Apartheid Museum, where we learned about the recent history of South Africa and its emancipation, Now, this was the kind of inspiration that comes from hearing about hard-learned lessons, about learning again about triumphs over injustice, about learning again about the potential for cruelty that exists in us, about learning again about the resiliency of the human spirit, and then again the accompanying resolutions that we might personally have made to attempt never to repeat the errors of our ancestors. That kind of inspiration as well. So it's not so much what or where, it's do you place yourself in that? That's an act of self-love. Allow that, And somebody once said to me, well, TV inspires me. Well, of course it does. I just saw the other day a show about critters that collect blue objects to decorate their nests to attract their mate. Fascinating. Or somebody said to me, movies inspire me. Well, of course they do. I watched The Boy from Mars 3 times. It was the only thing available on the flight. And syrupy sweet as it was, I found it to be quite inspiring. Or somebody will say, a game inspires me. Of course it does, because inspiration comes for you from wherever inspiration is. But do you go to it? Do you give yourself those moments? Or have you fallen into a rut? Which brings me to the fourth and final point, balance. Balance for me is so important because I have to watch out that I don't get all strict and fundamental on myself when I'm trying to fix up everything, Balance is actually an act of self-love when it is the act of making room for everything. Maybe balance is when you make space in your life for all of the times of strict discipline, as well as those times of strict indulgence. The times where you're organized and forward moving, as well as the times when you're lost and rambling. To make room, well, actually what I'm trying to say is not something new, and it's been said before, better, in an ancient text. And it goes like this. To everything there is a season, and a time to every purpose under the heaven. A time to be born and a time to die. A time to plant and a time to pluck up that which is planted. A time to slay and a time to heal. A time to break down and a time to build up. A time to weep and a time to laugh. A time to mourn and a time to dance. A time to cast away stones and a time to gather up stones together. A time to embrace and a time to refrain from embracing. A time to get and a time to lose. A time to keep and a time to cast away. A time to rend and a time to sow. A time to keep silence and a time to speak. And I want to fast forward to the 14th verse of this chapter, because the writer says something in it that is the key to activating self-love. He says something like, and I have learned that we cannot add anything, nor can we take anything away from those things that God hath made. And that is the key, not only to balance, but to activating love in your life. Because what it is inviting us to do is to take in the world and to realize that this is our home. To accept it and to call it good, just like Spirit did in the legend. And acceptance is love. But we will get to that. For today, I just wanted to leave you with some practical points for how to begin this journey. Some of them in the form of questions that come from the January 29th reading, for you to maybe savor and enjoy and see if they will stimulate you into a deeper appreciation for what God has made in you. It says this. Do you treat yourself well? Do you take vacations? Do you have downtime? Do you take personal time in which you are at liberty to do anything or nothing? Do you give yourself adequate sleep? Do you exercise your body and feed it nutritious food? Do you take time to indulge in the things you love doing and to be with the people you love being with? There it is. Just a direction to begin. So as we deepen in this consideration of love, as we return, we may be centered in an all-out love affair with what God has created in you. Let us pray. There is only one life, and that is God's life. Call it life. I don't know what else to call it. The all in all, the great everything, the initiator, the architect, let's call it the mind. That which is in and through everything, the cause of everything. It's visible, invisible, without center, without circumference, without limit, without beginning, without end. The ground of all being. That. We begin our prayer with that, knowing that no word can contain it and no name will ever name it. But we lean to it using words like life and love.